Welcome to the Builder's Bench. This is a construction keynote for the VRCA where politics meets construction. If you don't know much about the VRCA, we are the Vancouver Regional Construction Association representing the Lower Mainland, and that's 21 municipalities. We also have some national representation up here today. From the CCA, we have Louis-Philippe Champagne, Canadian Construction Association, the Associate Vice President of Public Affairs and Industry Practices. That's a long title. Seated next to LP, we have Chris Atchison, the president of the BC Construction Association, the BCCA.
Thanks, Craig.
And next to me is Janine Martin, the president, as I mentioned earlier, of the Vancouver Regional Construction Association. And on the end there, our friend Sajid Lakhani, our political consultant from Impact Public Affairs. Everyone up there today has been on the Builder's Bench podcast, and it's a podcast where we talk about everything political, but we're also talking about youth engagement in the industry, the brand of construction, everything construction related. But today, we're focusing on politics. There's so much to talk about. I'll do a quick intro because I thought it was pretty witty that I wrote it. So we're sitting right at the intersection of politics and construction, where decisions made in Ottawa, Victoria, and the 21 municipalities here in the Lower Mainland decide really what gets built, how fast it gets approved, and how much it costs. Elections might come and go, but permits, budgets, labor shortages, and trade risks stick around that we're seeing today. So we're not doing talking points today. It's about what's actually moving, what's stuck, and what the next year means for construction. And particularly, we're doing, again, that national focus, provincial, and here in the Lower Mainland with the Vancouver Regional Construction Association. So I wanted to start, I think it always starts at the top with the federal government. So much to talk about, LP. I say last year was the year of construction. Yep. Yes. We have new nation building offices. We have a lot of acronyms coming out of Ottawa. What's the latest scene? What are your opening remarks into the current state of federal politics?
There is a lot of acronyms in Ottawa. They do love that, and much more this year. So where do we start? It's a long discussion. It's a complex discussion. I think we'll start with one word that we've all felt very deeply this year. It's volatility. It's been really difficult for Canadians and Canadian businesses to figure out what the hell is going on and what's happening the next hour, the next day, the next week. If you do a quick recap of the last 16 months, we've seen just in federal politics, a minister of finance stand up against her prime minister. Said prime minister resigning, going through a leadership race, new prime minister, a federal election, and all that on the backdrop of course, what's happening with the U.S. and the relationship with the Donald Trump administration. It's been convoluted, to say the least, and the same has been true from politics to the economy. And I think that's really where we want to start the discussion and really have a perspective of what's to come. The last few years have been difficult for businesses, in great part because the economy was stagnant. The interest rate from the Bank of Canada were going quite high in response to inflation. It was difficult for businesses to fund projects and to stay afloat beyond just the challenge we've had in place for workforce shortage and all that. Things are easing and things are better now. We've seen Budget 2025 in Ottawa being announced in November with significant investment in our sector. This is big figures that can be scary for Canadian. $280 billion in capital spending. This creates significant question in terms of deficit and cost of borrowing. But nevertheless, $115 billion goes toward infrastructure project coast to coast. This is, as you said, a year of construction. The government in Ottawa talk about build, baby, build, and their new agenda to stimulate the economy. Now, the question is, will that survive the challenges of the year ahead? We're only in early February. We've seen at the global stage some significant disruption, challenges in Ukraine, in the Middle East, in Venezuela, potentially with Greenland. It is a challenging time to conduct business and to be in North America at large.
So we'll dive into everything LP was just talking about in regards to the MPO, the Build Canada Homes, tariffs, and such. I wanted to dive into, because I always say to Sajid, it feels like we're in a reality show when we're watching politics. When you watch Question Period in general, if any of you have never been to that, you should check it out. Everything that LP was just said, what's at stake? What's your opinion right now? I mean, we hear a lot of majority, minority. We don't have to get into seat numbers, but what's your take on the current scene? Sajid does federal, provincial, and municipal, but we'll start with the federal side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to follow up on what Craig says. If you do watch Question Period, I'm sorry, you may lose a bit of faith in democracy. They do act like children there at times, but the reality is we're in a minority government. And what that means is that the other parties can band together and vote against policies that are implemented by this Liberal government, the Prime Minister, and inherently, can vote no confidence to bring this government down. But we're not really in that situation right now. The Prime Minister tends to rate high in popularity, and from international appearances like Davos, a lot of the focus on U.S.-Canada relations. It signals for the industry that there's more at play. As LP mentioned, investments in the industry, however, that could all be at risk if this government falls. However, they're governing like a majority because so much of the focus are on big business issues and big industry issues and the internal domestic politics rifts that we saw in the Trudeau government.
It literally is like a reality show. Am I wrong?
Yeah, that it is.
All right, switching gears to the provincial side of things. Also a very busy year in provincial politics. A reminder that we had the provincial election in the fall of 2024, and then the first sitting of the EP government was in the January-February of 2025. Obviously, some big news. We'll get to the prompt payment legislation and such, but what's your take on where we're at, what last year was like, and where we're headed? We have a throne speech coming up. We have a budget coming up, Chris. Lots of activity in the provincial side as well.
Yeah, we're on the eve of the throne speech tomorrow. Budget will be released a week yesterday, so lots of political activity happening in British Columbia. But I think to look at it over the past year and where we were about a year ago from now, we were thrown into a lot of uncertainty, as was the rest of Canada. And I think BC came out very strong in its stance to gain independence in the construction market, independence in our economy. And it's been very interesting to see where we've gone since then. A number of rulings, a number of decisions. There is still a lot of uncertainty. And I would characterize the political economic landscape of British Columbia as being a little bit even more unsettled than they were during COVID. And thinking about how the construction industry came together during COVID to work with government to help us get through a very difficult time, and maintaining critical investments, maintaining critical projects. And even though we all were galvanized a year ago in our solidarity to kind of come together, it hasn't really played out that way across British Columbia. There's been this need for more consultation. There's been a need for more communication. And instead, decisions, it seems like, have been made a little bit more siloed, and we're finding out about things that are impacting the industry, undermining some certainty. And I think recent history has showed us that when we over-communicate, when we over-plan, when we come together, we're able to do a lot more. And so if we didn't learn a lesson from COVID, I think we've taken a step back. And now that we're facing budget pressures, we're facing national pressures, we're facing international pressures, this is a time where that adage of over-communication, coming together to collaborate on more that we can do together for an industry that has demonstrated itself to be the backbone of the British Columbia economy, never mind the national economy. The folks who understand industry, the subject matter experts, need to be in the room. And I say that notwithstanding, and I know you're going to get to it later, the tremendous progress that we've made around payment certainty coming to British Columbia. It's a separate issue, but I think on the macro level, what we need to do in British Columbia is get back to the table and make sure that the construction industry is reflected appropriately in the conversations with the common sense that the stakeholders, whether you're educators, whether you're contractors, can bring to bear on the discussions.
Yes, and there was some key legislation and bills passed last year that we'll dive into, prompt payment legislation, and of course, the Infrastructure Projects Acts. We'll get to that in a minute. Of course, wanted to hand the microphone over to Janine Martin, president of the Vancouver Regional Construction Association. It's our turn, Janine, this year for an election. We're heading into a municipal election. Opening remarks, what are you feeling? What are you hearing from members? What's your take on the current scene in the municipal side of things?
Yeah, let me just say, sometimes I think about when I was thinking about my future career and what that would look like. And I did not lay in bed at night as a 16-year-old girl thinking, I can't wait to run an association for construction. And now I look back at that moment and I think, why didn't I? Because construction, Chris says it's the backbone. We say it drives the economy. 10% of the GDP in BC is driven by construction. 150,000 people working construction in the Lower Mainland. Let's think about that. 150,000 people driving 10% of the economy. It's amazing. So I couldn't be prouder about the things that we do advocating for construction. And then, as Chris and everyone notes, the uncertainty we're moving towards. Like, nothing makes anyone happy when we compare something to COVID, right? It's so sad. And so what are we hearing from members? We're hearing varied things. For sure, major infrastructure investment in BC is going well, some might say, with the amount of institutional facilities that are being built and the amount of construction companies working on those. That's fantastic. There's not quite enough of the manageable work for some of the smaller and mid-sized contractors. We need to think about that. We do a bit of commercial traffic at the VRCA office where people come in for stat deck signing and to pick up contracts and things like that. And the word on the street is rippled. People are feeling a slowdown. Of course, if you read the paper, you read about developers doing layoffs. None of this bodes well for the driver of the economy. As you can imagine, if construction slows down, it impacts everything. So we're very concerned, but also excited about what might happen in the future.
Thank you, Janine. And just, the municipal election is on September or October 17th?
October 17th.
October 17th. It's actually the day before the Awards of Excellence that the VRC has put in. Quick plug there. All right, so we're going to go back to the top where it all starts, the federal government. There was a lot of announcements. I actually printed out the CCA briefing notes, and I love when it's 3 pages. It's good news for the industry. I'm just going to rattle off some of the stuff that happened to LP, and then we can jump into what it all means for everyone in the room.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. So I mentioned the big figure of budget, right? If we break it down, what's important to keep in mind for the year ahead is that money will start flowing to provinces and then municipalities. I'll touch on some big one. The BCSF, the Building Community Strong Fund, is an envelope from Ottawa, $51 billion over 10 years, that's coming down to provinces. That's going to take some time because there will need to be extensive negotiation with ministers and premiers to make sure where the money goes, why do we want it in specific cities and whatnot. There's a sub-envelope in there that goes directly to municipality. Vancouver will likely be top of that list to try to fund projects that directly impact community in allowing for more housing to be built. That is public transit, roads, sewer, name it. So this is a great initiative from Ottawa that we're hoping to see unfolding over the next few months. One of the slowest one. If you look at some of the fast one, we see massive amount of money being put into national defense. This is not just tanks and guns and airplanes. That's also, marine infrastructures and base infrastructures and airstrips all across Canada. And this is already rolling out. One of the first one that hit the ground running because there's an apparatus already in place for national defense through Defense Construction Canada. So that's a very good news. And a third one is trade infrastructure. At the CCA, with all of our partners across Canada, we've been pushing hard for many years now that we need to reinvest in our trade infrastructure. That's true for ports, for airports, for railroads, for roads, in order to move our goods from province to province so we can buy Canadian, but also to access new markets and diversify from the United States. There is a new initiative in Budget 2025 that will look just at that. So these are just some examples that are added on top of last year's announcement. You mentioned the MPO, the Major Project Office. That means that streamlining project across Canada. BC have seen some significant notification in that list, especially with LNG terminals, but also Build Canada Homes, which is investing significant amount of money in helping municipality grow that housing portfolio. So a bit of a whirlwind of activity in Ottawa. It can be hard to follow, but a lot of good position to push industry forward. Now, it's not all that positive. We have some serious challenges ahead, and it's really going to come down to capacity and productivity. The single biggest issue was mentioned, I think, by all of us. It really is workforce. I'm really excited when I come here in Vancouver and many regions in Canada to see local and regional association doing so much to promote workforce training and getting people into our industry at the local level. In Ottawa, not so much. We're really working hard to try to convince the government that they need to put money where their mouth is and invest into training skilled trade people, general labor, making sure that we have the workforce to build all that infrastructure they want. And I'll just give some figures to conclude my point. At the national level, construction is 1.6 million people. That's a whole lot of workers Canada-wide When you think about it, Canada is about 20 million workers, half the population, right? We need 40,000 people today just to close the gap on vacancies. It was much worse a few years ago in the depth of the workforce crisis. We're at 100,000, but 40,000 is still significant. And this is only be growing in the next decade as we see a significant part of our workforce retire. Currently, we have about 20% of the construction workforce in Canada, which are 55 years old and over. This is a full pivot from the 70s, where 20% was about the 15 to 18 years old, right? So drastic changes that we see in the industry, challenges ahead, but great opportunity if you manage to seize it.
I always like to say that government likes to get the cart before the horse. So we've been talking a lot about building and building and build, baby, build. Sounds like a rock song when Mr. Mark Carney came out with that last year. But can we dive into just a bit more about the apprentice side of things? Because there were some funding announcements for apprenticeships, both provincially and locally. But there is kind of a caveat to it. It's more of it's not for everybody as far as the whole working industry. Do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, construction is a complex industry. Let's admit it. Many people in this room will know it well because you've spent your whole life here. But if you're a member of parliament, if you're a minister, understanding how construction work, from the GC to the trades, the complex supply chain, but especially the trades and the way we define our segment of workforce is extremely challenging. And the problem we have, and we see that across the country, is the misunderstanding between what is a construction worker and what is a skilled trade worker. Two very closely intertwined concepts, but very different. And the government tend to hyper-focus on skilled trade and specific skilled trade that they define to be more at risk. The best example of that is in 2023 when they released the Express Entry Program, meant to have immigration focus on these specific trade, welders and carpenters and whatnot. Very important subset of our sector. But in doing so, they made a top list and ignored a massive part of our supply chain, creating more uncertainty and unevenness. So that's the challenge we need to do at the municipal, provincial, and federal level in educating governments and officials to understand how construction work.
Do you know?
Yeah, I just want to add to that, just to bring that to the British Columbia, their level as well. There was an announcement late in the fall from the ministry, from the province, and from the Ministry of Post-Secondary and Future Skills, of course, and where it's $242 million over the next 3 years is going into skilled trades training, which is an incredible windfall, one of the largest investments that has been made in trades training by any government in Canada. And we have yet to see how that is going to play out. But to LP's points, we are facing a rapid exodus of folks from the industry, not just due to attrition. We always are battling people coming in and leaving quickly, but we're also changing the culture of the construction industry through numerous programs and methods to keep people in this industry longer. But they're not going to stay much longer than 55 to 60 years old. So we have 20% of the industry, and across British Columbia, that's 250,000 British Columbians total working in the industry that we need to continue to have a plan to be, replacing. And that will come through trades training. But as our members and as our boards of directors continue to tell us, it's not just the skilled trades, it's the estimators, it's the project managers, it's the succession planning for the contractors who are the owners of the future. So this is a complete continuum. Of course, we welcome the investments on the skilled trade side, but we need to be paying attention to the complete ecosystem of construction that allows us to build the critical infrastructure and housing that we need.
Yeah, and I'll just chime in there on that also, as Chris noted, the overall overhaul of the brand of construction and what it looks like to be in construction. And sometimes I say bringing sexy back to construction. Like, there's a real opportunity here, as I said, about the economy and what construction drives, but creating an environment that is welcome and inclusive. And some of that we're going to build through immigration, targeted immigration and otherwise, to work in construction, but also our own pipeline into construction. And so creating an environment where parents want to recommend to their kids going into a skilled trade or other part of construction, estimating or otherwise. This is an opportunity. There's such an opportunity in construction to have an amazing, lucrative, pride-inducing career. None of this happens without us. When you think about people in construction that I know, you drive around town, oh yeah, I worked on that building. Or I did this. Like, that's amazing. Passing that on to your children, saying that's amazing. So we want to create an environment that's inclusive. And I'll just say one more thing on that topic, which is when we talk about women in construction and creating an environment that's welcome to women in construction. So 5% of the construction workforce are women. 50% of the general workforce are women. There's a huge opportunity to fill this labor gap with women and attracting people that wouldn't otherwise think that they were a fit for construction. And that goes back to creating an environment that's inclusive and productive for everybody.
Yeah, I just want to echo the sentiments of my colleagues here. Based on my conversations recently with government, whether that's the federal or provincial, I've heard one buzzword over and over again, and it's workforce ready when they speak about youth engagement and youth policy. So whether that's through a federal program like the Canada Summer Jobs Program or elsewhere, there's a lot of opportunity for construction companies to bring youth into the fold and often be compensated in terms by the federal government or provincial government to pay their salary and bring them in the fold, because what we've seen is a shift from the previous federal government, where it's more interested in private interest-free loans for university, to more hard brick-and-mortar investments and apprenticeship. Because for many of my friends that work in the trades, heck, they made more than I did right out of school. So it's an attractive industry, and the government's recognize that.
And just a quick plug, we'll actually be talking about this exact topic at around 11:15, just at the Connector Lounge. The Vancouver School Board is going to be there talking about a really cool program they have for apprenticeships. We're talking about bring trades to school, and we're talking about honor their work. Very cool initiatives. We're trying to build that pipeline for the future and get youth onto the tools, seeing what career options are out there for them. All right, so I wanted to quickly talk about this, a quick minute maybe, Sajid or LP, the dreaded T word. We're not Donald Trump. We're talking about tariffs. I had to. What's the latest? Let's.
It's still rough, and it's interesting. I was at BUILDEX Toronto in December presenting on that same topic, and I was saying things are better, things are easing. Before Christmas, Donald Trump was no longer talking about the 51st state. A lot of the tariff and counter-tariff were removed in November. Things were looking up. Well, that didn't last long. In January, where we had a full pivot, and now it's all about Canadian sovereignty, Denmark sovereignty in Greenland, the overall state of trade. We've heard just yesterday that we have dispute over the Ontario Bridge, the Gordie Howe Bridge, right? This is a very, again, to my point, very volatile situation. Let me break down a bit what it means to construction, because the tariffs are a serious challenge for the Canadian economy, but especially for us in construction. On one side, when the United States put severe tariff on Canada, like we've seen, 25% overall, targeted 50% at a time, this effectively shut down the supply chain between our two nations that have been heavily integrated in manufacturing and supply chain for decades now, thanks to NAFTA, now CUSMA, which is about to enter a renegotiation. This more serious problem for construction is the return from the U.S., the counter tariff that we had to put in place in order to protect manufacturing company in Canada, especially the steel sector and auto sector in Ontario. This is what really hurt for construction, because a lot of our product that we need for buildings and for roads are simply not manufactured in Canada. Many years ago, we shut down the last plant for float glass in Canada, which was in Quebec. As we speak today, there's no glass production for buildings anywhere in our country. We need to bring it from elsewhere. Historically, it's been exclusively the United States. So now we have to pivot to Mexico or other market where the price will be significantly higher. Same is true for the steel sector. We have significant steel production in Canada. We're proud of our Canadian steel, but the amount we produce is insufficient for what we use, and the type of product is very specific. We have rolled steel, sure, but I-beams and specific product are, for the most part, all manufactured in the U.S. So when we see these counter tariff and being told, well, sure, you can import it, but 25% higher, it creates drastic impact on project cost, which means that your province or municipality might have been planning for 3 new elementary schools. Now they can only do 2. This is the attrition that will impact construction company, governments, and then Canadians at the end of the day. But the worst part, and it's still unfolding as we speak, is that government now have to put in place protectionist policy. to further stabilize the situation. We've seen it in Ottawa in December with the introduction of the Buy Canadian policy, fundamentally a good policy to say let's promote Canadian manufacturer first. The problem is it does further increase the price of project because now what you have is not just a financial disincentive in the 25%. It is a policy that says you cannot buy outside Canada, including foreign partners that are not the U.S. So if you're now in charge of building a lab for the federal government or a military base or any kind of federal project, you are to abide by the Buy Canadian policy rule, making sure that all of your product come from Canada, with some exception. This is also unfolding at the provincial level. BC, not so much yet, but in Ontario, the Buy Ontarian Act is in place and is even more, intense, I would say, than the federal one. So I think in 2026, we're likely to see more and more protectionist measure at the federal, provincial, and municipal level, where they'll say, our new water treatment plant is essential so we can build more homes, but we'll only accept bid from local contractor or we'll only use material done locally. This is real challenges for construction.
All right, thank you, LP. So we're going to switch gears. Some great news. Years in the making, Chris. Years in the making. I'll let you dive in. Prompt payment legislation. It was enacted in the fall, correct? And then what's the latest?
Yeah, thanks. It seems like we've any chance that I get to bring this up in the past years, it's always been where are we with prompt payment legislation or bringing payment certainty to the construction community in British Columbia. Most people will know that prompt payment legislation exists in Alberta. It exists in Ontario, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and pretty much every province in the country. And BC was one of the last dominoes to fall. Legislation was introduced in October of 2025. It went through the debate stage and received royal assent in November of 2025. So as of today, we have a new law in British Columbia that is the Construction Prompt Payment Act. That's the good news. The bad news is that law will not come into effect. It will not be enacted until we have developed regulations along with the Ministry of the Attorney General. So it's a huge milestone for us to have got to this proverbial start line. But I will want to caution everybody that we are still just at the start line. We can encourage all businesses to start ready themselves for what this will look like. The legislation is there for you to read. BCCA has hosted a number of webinars on this topic. We currently have more than 75 FAQs and reports and the legislation to review on our website. There, shameless plug, but there will be a panel this afternoon at 2:30 to discuss specifically the Construction Prompt Payment Act as well. So while this is incredibly good news for the province of British Columbia, it's taken a long time to get here. It's going to take a little bit longer before it becomes common in the ecosystem of construction. There needs to be an adjudication authority set up. There needs to be the regulations developed, and there needs to be a lot more education to make sure that everyone comes along with us. And there's still a lot of advocacy work for us to do to make sure that this is implemented fairly and consistently across the entire continuum and spectrum of the construction industry. And we'll make sure that there are no carve-outs as well for other segments of the sector who may feel that is something that they should be entitled to. And I think at the end of the day, we'll stand by what we've always said to government for this last decade of advocacy is everyone deserves to be paid on time for the work that they've done. It's as simple as that. It's a great first step, but there's a little ways to go. And please pay attention to all the upcoming updates on this developing situation.
We said last year, it's common sense legislation.
It is. It's such common sense. And one, I just want to celebrate Chris Atchison for a second. BCCA, he inherited this file. He's been working on this for more than 10 years. Close to 10 years.
That deserves a round of applause. Yes?
Yeah. And I think, just to put it in perspective, how important that is. When you think about how much is what do we say? 80% of the construction industry are companies under 20 people. Can you imagine you're an entrepreneur, you start your business, you're working in construction, you're building your portfolio, and you don't get paid on time? So the chain reaction impact of your ability to pay your staff, to pay your suppliers, their ability to pay their mortgage or their rent, like this is so important. It's criminal that it hasn't been enacted. And we look forward to more on this. Thank you, Chris.
Can I just say a word on this? Because prompt payment has been a big file nationally as well. First of all, congratulations for both of you in the network here in BC in making this reality, even though that took a little time. Not your fault. But I do want to point out what you just said. The fight is not over. I'm not going to name names, but there's provinces in this country where legislation have been passed years ago now, and it's still not in action. And we have seen also very significant carve-out to these policies, which defeat the entire purpose, because the point of a prompt payment legislation is to put guidelines so the bad actor do not cause problem. So if you exempt those bad actors, then you end up with the legislation that have no weight. So thank you for doing this, and again, keep the fight.
Yes, thank you, Chris. I like to always say that politics is a long game, particularly anything that comes out of Victoria or Ottawa. Let's stay on the provincial side. We're going to jump into municipal side of things in just a second, Janine. Another piece of legislation that was passed in the fall was the Infrastructure Projects Act. I believe it was Bill 15. Sajid, where are we at with that? You know, it's intended to fast-track major infrastructure projects, very similar to Bill C5? C5 on the national level, which seems to be moving along. What's the update? Where we're at with that? What can we expect to see? Lots going on the provincial side in the next couple of days as well.
Yeah, it's tough. Back to the bill you pointed out. It started as very very controversial. Was seen as a power grab by the government to supersede the legislature for foreign or domestic economic threats, signaling that it was a tariff response bill. And then it was morphed into fast tracking construction. We think great for our industry, similar to the federal government, a priority to fast track construction projects seen as shovel ready. Unfortunately, since it was passed in this last spring, there have been no projects fast tracked. So it's really important for the industry to add pressure to the government on that, whether that's, because of them not prioritizing it or not having funds. Unfortunately, we're in a $12 billion deficit. So that's important to note as we're going into a budget next week at a throne speech tomorrow. But your industry is seen as a capital project industry when there's not much money in the coffers. Building a railway, building hospitals aggregates a lot of economic activity as well as, jobs and building communities. But unfortunately, operational spending can suffer. So it's important for the industry to still pressure the government on workforce development, on training, because sometimes training is seen as expensive while capital projects is seen as more favorable.
How would you say is it possible? Like we see the Bill C5, the national side of things, they got a lot of projects moving. We're having a lot of projects coming at MPO. What would be the balance and the difference between why we're not seeing it provincially? Am I putting you on the spot here? And why we're seeing it federally? Who wants to answer that?
Let me talk about C5 first, and I think you'll pick up on that. So just for clarity, Bill C5 was one of the first bill from the current administration really early on last spring, and it was a 2-in-1. Not quite an omnibus bill, but very close. It was the One Canadian Economy Act where they said, we'll promote major project, create the major project office, but also facilitate interprovincial trade. And then they had to split it in two because this was not moving anywhere. MPO was created, and I'll be a bit critical here. They're doing the best they can. But most of the projects they've been announced for Fast Track were projects that were pretty much already done and approved, right? The Port of Montreal extension, there was no approval left to be done. So it was kind of a wishful thinking political. But the fundamental problem with the MPO and the way this was tackled is it gives the Prime Minister a political tool to say this project is important to me, so I want it fast track, missing the point that there's 150 other major projects in Canada that are stuck in red tape. Right? So it is very much a band-aid solution to say, well, create this little agency to fast-track things we like instead of fixing the problem with red tapes and regulation that slow down the entire process. Not saying that environmental assessment and consultation is not essential, but the way it's fragmented federally is the problem that need to be resolved long-term, right? And then the second part of that bill is the interprovincial trade barrier. The federal government has removed a lot of this barrier, but most of them really rest with the provinces. And many provinces don't want to open their border because it means competition against their own businesses and companies. So if you ask me, will we see more trade between provinces in 26, 7, and 8? I would say no. We're pretty much done with easing this up because market will need to protect themselves more and more. Now, how that compares to what's happening in BC, I don't know.
Well, a lot of it's values-based, and as LP mentioned, it's seen as a political tool. It's easy for the Prime Minister to go over the head of the province and work directly with an Indigenous community. Because, for example, as we saw Niska Nation, to fast track that project, and a lot of it is around values. Unfortunately, Premier Eby is not seen as a team player around the cabinet table because he doesn't want a pipeline, while the other prairie provinces do, and that's in the favor of the Prime Minister to build a project. So there's a lot of political tools at use, but it's important for industry to continue advocating for fast-tracking projects to both levels of government, because there's a lot of money that this industry brings. And when, we're facing tariffs, facing economic vulnerability and needing to diversify partners, building that next hospital, building that SkyTrain project will actually increase economic activity.
Yeah, I think just one thing to add with regards to Bill 15 is that I think, having been immersed in what we're going through with the Construction Prompt Payment Act as well, is that we know the act is there, but we're not able to use it yet. And in some cases, the regulations haven't been fully developed, and there might be some good reasons why not. And I think that there was a lot of backlash against Bill 15 when it first came out. And there is also this element of political will and political calculation about when and why we might need to use it. I think the urgency was there when it was conceived as a means to make sure BC could be autonomous and make some decisions that it needed to do to be a catalyst for the economy without obstruction. But given the backlash, given the pushback, given what's happened, again, locally, nationally, provincially, there's less of an appetite, less of an urgency to use it. And there's enough other investment going on that sort of filled that void. So I think there's a combination of, there's not the political will that there was when it was first conceived, and they can also stand behind the fact that the regulations aren't fully developed in order to implement that bill as fulsomely as they, and that's what they will continue to hold back on, that the completion of that as a convenient excuse, quite frankly, for why we're not using that bill hasn't been used yet.
And at the end of the day, we'll take all the attention and legislation and funding we can get for the construction industry, and we'll continue to highlight that as we head into the municipal election. I have one more provincial question heading into, is it tomorrow? We're heading into a provincial throne speech. It sets the tone for the next year. We've already had one last year. Is it normal to have one? What are we expecting out of this, Sajid?
Yeah, it's quite unusual to have a throne speech not following an election, but recently we found out that there's going to be a quick prorogation of Parliament tomorrow. And what that could be is, it's pretty much resetting the balance sheet, clearing all the legislation that was on the order paper, any priorities, but you have the ability to bring it back. So it's also a political tool, and that's what we're seeing right now when, it's there's some unpopularity right now with the government. There's a leadership race in the opposition. So a political tool that's going to be used in a throne speech tomorrow, where the government will express its priorities. And it's quite convenient that we have the budget the following week. Perhaps it's to take some attention away from the fact that we have a $12 billion deficit, and the finance minister has already expressed that she's going to be the most unpopular politician in the province next week. But we'll see what is said tomorrow. Last year, there was a commitment to housing supply and infrastructure building right after the first tariff dispute. So if we see that tomorrow, that's a commitment to industry, and that's a commitment that we are a priority. However, if we don't, that may signal a budget the following week that may not be as industry friendly.
And quick note.
Oh, I got to say, last time we had a throne speech in Ottawa, we had the King presented. So I'm hoping the BC one is as good, right?
Chris. We're just going to say a quick plug as well. Next week, we'll be doing a recap of the throne speech and the budgets on the Builders Bench podcast. You can scan that QR code to start listening next week. All right. So, Janine, it starts at the top. We have the federal government, the provincial side of things. The funding gets doled out. Billions in dollars promised for infrastructure, apprenticeship programs. We're heading into municipal election year, and we have 21 municipalities here in the Lower Mainland that VRCA represents, 1,000+ member companies. We are gearing up with a partnership with our political consultant, STG, on the end there to inform you, to engage. We're already starting to meet with mayor and council of municipalities. We have our first meeting coming up with Burnaby. The intent is to keep that spotlight on construction on that local level. So kudos to the Construction for Canadians campaign that the LP and CCCA did nationally. So we're taking that and putting that local spin on it. Janine, let's dive in. It all starts with construction. it also all starts at the municipalities. That's where you're getting your permits. That's where you're getting your procurement. So what are we hearing from members? What are the key issues? What are the flex points that we're going at when we head into the next couple months?
Yes. So I just want to go back a little bit. So when we had our provincial election a few years ago, we had a series called Constructive Conversations, where we spoke to the 3 and then 2 candidates for premier. And one of the things that we said to all of those candidates is we feel like construction is flying under the radar and not to the level of importance that we want. So now what you hear from this stage is construction has been elevated to a top level issue and awareness by all of our politicians at the federal and provincial level. So we are looking to create that same visibility at the municipal level this year. So what we want to go out and talk about, none of these issues are going to surprise you. Workforce development, of course, that impacts everything. If we don't have the workforce to do the work, these are your constituents. These are people that are important to you, that are on the ground working in construction. If we have delayed permits, if we have long wait times, if we have continued lack of approvals to move projects forward, those of you working in construction know months, even years for some projects to get approved. Things don't get cheaper over time, right? Cost escalation continues to raise. So what we're looking at is, again, creating that visibility on these topics with these municipal candidates. These are, for all intents and purposes, not construction-focused people. It's our job to educate them as to why it matters and why they should care. And so we are rolling out our campaign in just a few months to get a real focus on construction's issues at the municipal level and try to drive change on some of these issues.
We always like to say as well, the municipal elections don't get as much attention as the provincial and federal. They don't seem to be as sexy as we like to say in the industry, but I'm seeing a lot of rumbling right now. I think it's because it's rolling out into all the announcements we're seeing construction related. And again, all the budget announcements and all the funding announcements. So the campaign we're going to be launching, the website is called Build Lower Mainland. So that website will be chock full of information. So we're going to be reaching out to all the mayoral candidates to offer up a video that you can go on the website and watch, speaking to you directly, industry, what their portfolio is going to be, how they're going to change things up. I think we're seeing communities growing exponentially. Like Surrey is on par to be bigger than Vancouver when we're talking municipalities and population. You have infrastructure. You have all this money that's all being doled out. No one's saying when they're going to spend it or those dates. So we're really going to break things down. And the website will be launching early March. We're in the early phases, and we'll have some information, a local stat pack on the great work that we do in the industry. And again, as Chris was mentioning, it's $29 billion industry. So we'll break that down and really focus on those numbers for the Lower Mainland. So I want to get final remarks, but we do have about 10 minutes left here. Does anyone have any questions? We have there's 2 microphones up there. If you just want to step up to the mic, there's one right there, and then there's one at the back. Oh, you got it in your phone. This is going to be good.
Testing. Can you hear me all right? Yeah? All right. It is often said by various economists and various levels of government in Canada that we lag other G7 nations in productivity. To try to understand why, University of Calgary professor Trevor Thome has been recently tapped to lead a team of researchers with, to steal your own words, AEC being a big chunk of Canada's GDP to the tune of 60 plus billion per year, I assume. What insight or insights could this panel share into where are the greatest productivity challenges in Canada's AEC industry? i.e., is it software technology? Is it hardware technology? Is it equipment? Is it logistics? What is it?
Thank you for the question. It's an essential one. So first of all, thanks for the shout out for University of Calgary. We are at the CC working with them on that study as we speak. We are setting up the framework. I think it's going to be essential for government, academia from all levels, university and technical school, and industry to work together to figure out what the challenge is. So there's a few things I want to say here. First of all, I want to eradicate a myth that productivity in construction is not the fault of the worker. It's not that people on work site are slackers or not working hard, which is often what government think when we say productivity in construction. The fundamental problem with our productivity issue in construction is twofold. First, it's not easy to measure. The way we measure productivity in Canada and around the world is based on manufacturing, on supply chain, on single vendor. When we have a supply chain of GCs and many trades and many people involved in an ecosystem, it's very difficult to measure the efficient productivity of that supply chain compared to manufacturing, for example. This is something we need to flush out. How do we measure productivity in construction so we can properly track it forward? But then the subset of that is, yes, we do have an issue. So how do we innovate in order to change the reality of our industry? In the last decade, almost 2 decades now, we've seen extensive innovation. I see massive drones right over there that help in surveying buildings and doing maintenance work. We see more and more integration of BIM, Internet of Things, technologies on workplace to save a lot of time and millions upon millions in project. We need to keep in that path of modernization, digitalization, and transformation. And this will eventually be a question of modernizing the workforce as well. What is the role of a trade worker? What is the role of the laborer on the work site? How much AI plays into it? We are at a transitional time right now in construction. I cannot tell you what it's going to be like in 10 years, but I know we have homework to do today with government, with unions, and with academia to figure out what that crux and push us forward in building better and faster.
Yeah, I think the only thing I will add to that, like it's one thing to be aware and be able to measure it. It's also an understanding that our industry is already doing it in pockets. We need to be pulling those individuals to the forefront and demonstrating what their advancements are in technology and efficiencies. They're doing it in isolation for a competitive advantage in a very competitive industry at the present time. So it's up to us as association leaders to bring those folks forward, shine a spotlight on them, and use the multiplier effect to kind of make sure that that technology and that innovation is more communicated, more broadly understood at all levels of government. Great question.
Yeah, I just want to shed light on what you're speaking about productivity challenges. It's unfortunate in British Columbia, the growth of the public sector has been often at the expense of the private sector. So, 3-4 years ago, we had a $6 billion surplus. Now we're at a $12 billion deficit. And a lot of that was based on operational spending for staffing. So as the public sector grew by 12 people, for every 12 people that were growing in the public sector, only 5 were hired in the private sector. So unfortunately, that's a huge disservice to the private sector and companies like yours in terms of productivity when we're not growing at the same pace when we should be.
Next question.
Hi, can you hear me? Cool. Hi, I'm Alex. I'm from BCIT's Building Science, and I'd love to ask a broader based question. Seeing Trump's disruptions to the supply chain currently, do you see Canada moving for decoupling more from the U.S. economy?
LP.
I'll take this one as well. Yes. And honestly, I'll tell you, it's long overdue. Back in 2022, the CC with our partner from across Canada launched the CTIP campaign, the Canada Trade Infrastructure Plan, to basically tell governments, we need to start diversifying our trade. Once upon a time, Canada was a proud trading nation, one of the best in the world. And based on the World Bank data from 2019, we fell from the top 10 to place 35 right beside Azerbaijan. And the main reason here is because our port infrastructure and our trade infrastructure was insufficient to get it to the Asian market and get it to Europe. We've overly relied on the U.S. because of NAFTA for decades now. And the U.S. will always be there. They'll always be a partner whether we like it or not. But being extremely reliant on a single country make it impossible to navigate the storm when political challenges happen domestically, like we see right now in the U.S., to try to avoid having the issue in Canada as well. So I believe Donald Trump, as much as we might be upset with what's happening, was a long overdue wake-up call to Canadians to say, okay, we need to do something to have better relationship with Asia, with Europe, with ourselves amongst provinces. And I think, whatever we think about Mark Carney, good or bad, one thing he's doing very well right now is securing these trade deals around the world and really thinking of Canada as a business. So I hopefully will move in that direction Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. To add on that, for a long time, Canada wasn't seen as an attractive investment market, but a commitment to attracting international investors, whether that is at the World Economic Forum or these trips or signaling to other partners, is going to be important to decouple. But it's not Canada just doing that. The provinces are also taking it upon themselves. We see the Premier going to China, Korea, India to make new trading partners, as well as a lot of the prairie premiers doing the same because their individual economies are at risk with just relations with various states. You may hear about the Gordie Howe Bridge situation. Apparently, we didn't pay for it, and Michigan wants part of it again. So with that lack of reliability, it's going to be important for every province and, frankly, even cities to have that influence.
Thank you. And I totally agree with the sentiment. Nostalgia is not a strategy.
Thanks for the question. So we got about 5 minutes here. I'm going to give a lightning round minute to each of you. What are you looking forward to in 2026? What should we as industry be looking forward to? It can be politically, it can be project-based. Sajid, we'll start on the end there.
Yeah, just continuing to be a frontline industry. It's unfortunate that these tariffs are impacting industries, but with that gives more opportunity to be frontline and be able to advocate and lobby for what we want as an industry. The budget showed that. As LP mentioned, it was very much infrastructure budget. So let's keep that momentum. What we've really noticed is that those niche industries are not as attractive to government and the international community right now. We're seemingly in a post-war situation. The bulwark industries from construction to auto to agriculture are seen as the industries that are going to take us to the next economic frontier. So I encourage you all to get involved because construction is going to be at the cornerstone of that.
I'm going to end on a more positive note because I'm good with the dooming and the challenges. But I will say, honestly, for 2026, I think we'll see a lot of positive out of what's happening in Ottawa. I think we'll see some stability in economic term and industry term. And I think the industry will thrive. We are seeing a reduction of the concern with our supply chain. We are seeing a betterment of our economy. The GDP per capita is going up. Interest rates are coming down. People are ready to build. Money is flowing down. So it will take some weeks, maybe months to get there. But I think mid-26 onward will be the year of construction.
I like hearing that. Chris?
Yeah, I'm gonna build on that optimism. I think what we have on stage here that demonstrates this continuum of local, regional, provincial, national insight and partnership into the construction economy of British Columbia and Canada. Our integrated model of this association network does great service to the industry that it serves. We talk a lot about the uncertainty that causes cost escalations. We talk about the uncertainty that's foisted upon us from external sources. But we're here to be proactive. We're here to identify those issues. We're here to address them. We're here to communicate with government and stakeholders. We're a bridge. We've used the word bridge a lot today, but we're a functional bridge. We're a bridge that's open, and paid for. And we can do a lot more to make sure that those lines of communication are open. The construction industry has arrived. No longer are we going to be relegated to kind of an afterthought, or they'll just get it done. It is our time. And I think we need to continue to seize that moment, insert ourselves in the conversation, not just find out later about what occurred at the table. And that's our job for the foreseeable future, is to make sure that we maintain this place in kind of as the economic heartbeat of our region, our province, and our nation.
Janine, we have a big year ahead of us.
We do. I feel like they took all the good stuff. They said it all. But I'll just circle back to what we touched on before. So as we've talked about lots of facts and figures today, but the facts and figures are there. The facts are there about construction. I'm looking forward to taking those facts out to the municipalities, sharing with them the influence that construction should have on the decisions that are made in the future, and then paying attention because construction is going to drive our local economy. So this is for us locals. This is what we're going to do for the next 6 to 8 months, and we're looking forward to that. I am looking forward to that. Also, I'm looking forward to who's coming next on the Builders Bench.
Yes. quick plug there as well. Today's session, this whole conversation has been recorded, so we're going to post it online on the Builders Bench podcast. I'll leave this up here. You can scan that QR code. And if you want to re-listen, we also have another panel tomorrow. It's municipally focused on the municipal election. We have our current chair, Scott Atkins, and then our former chair, Regina Markland, both in industry, and Janine and myself and Sajid will also be on that panel. Quick plug, VRCA, Vancouver Regional Construction Association. If you don't know who we are, we have a fancy new brochure that just came out. We're just located down the hall there, the Connector Lounge. We have free coffee right now for our next session. I'm going to walk over there and host another one. It's on the the apprenticeship programs that we're talking about, that bring trades to school. We're talking about solutions-based advocacy. We're talking about those programs, trying to get the kids attracted to the tools, get them on the tools. So that's in about 15-minute time. Let's give it up for our panelists. We have Sajid Lakhani, Director at Impact Public Affairs. Your national representation, Louis-Philippe Champagne, Associate Vice President of Public Affairs and Industry Practices at the Canadian Construction Association, President of the BCCA, BC Construction Association, Chris Atchison. And we have Janine Martin here, the President of the Vancouver Regional Construction Association. My name is Craig Larkins, and this has been the Builders Bench.